Many people know us already and know that we just lost our baby girl, Janine, earlier this year, April of 2020. And we want to kind of tell some of that story and how it happened. We're going to break this up into two separate videos because we know that nobody's got the time or the bandwidth to sit around for 30, 45 minutes that it takes to get through all this. So, but again, we just want to glorify the Lord and talk about a little bit about what he's done.
I think first of all, I'd like to ask if you're watching this to truly pause and take a moment and try not to listen and not to think of us, Michael and Taylor. Try not to, any prior knowledge that you have of us, whether good or bad, try not to take that into account and just try not to do anything with us, but simply look at Christ, because I feel like this taught us many lessons, but one of those things was to just keep our eyes focused on him. And if you can see that within us, if there is something good that you see or something that condemns you or makes you happy or sad, whatever that is, take that to God and glorify him with us in that.
We actually decided to finish this video back in our wonderful backyard because it was hurting my arm to hold that camera up like that. I wasn't interested in doing that anymore.
You can see our ring light.
Our what?
Our tripod.
They wouldn't have been able to see it if you didn't say nothing about it.
I know.
What's wrong with you?
I sure like it.
Listen, I don't want y'all looking at that ring light back there. It's not on. It's just to hold the thing up. So grow up. Let's carry on. So I'm gonna let Taylor actually start talking about the testimony from her perspective, because God was working with both of us separately in a lot of ways at the beginning of this, and I'll just kind of chime in from time to time with my stuff too.
When it came to picking, asking someone to be with us, be with me in labor, asking a midwife, I began to pray, and it took me quite a while. I feel like we prayed and fasted and tried to seek, and I finally ended up asking some people to be with me, and I was very curious, wasn't sure why these
Almost stressed, actually.
Yeah.
Just because things weren't as smooth as they were when you had Judah as far as that process.
Yeah. I didn't know these people at all. They didn't know me, and it was very curious to me. But later on down the road, I feel like now I understand why God did that, and just had to be faithful in going through that. And same thing, if you have a kid, you know, you stress about everything, and so I was praying about even who to watch with Judah in case we needed someone to watch him during labor. And I felt like two people. I felt like asking my sister, which lived in Oklahoma, we live in Indiana, and I felt like asking Trish Neal, who lives here, to watch him. Both of which I was curious, why two people, why someone in Indiana, why someone in Oklahoma. I didn't know. I was just curious how that would play out. And later on, God obviously knew before we did. We found out why, but
I think there's a lot of questions. I think for both of us, initially, I struggled with questions of, because whenever she was pregnant with Judah, I didn't have to worry at all. God already told me in a dream that it was a boy, and he told me what his name was already in a dream. And so, like, whenever that didn't come fairly early on in the pregnancy, I began to start having my own sets of questions. So I feel like this particular go around was just full of questions on both of our sides.
Yeah. Yeah, which leads me, I feel like God just, not through anything specific, externally, like all the signs. I had a ton of baby movement pretty early on, and a lot of it, she was way more active than Judah was. And just a pretty healthy pregnancy considering how sick I was with Judah. I did fairly well and especially we were in Texas when we found out we were pregnant. We moved here, and I just did fairly well, but I felt like God had just spoke to me in my heart and told me that something wasn't going to be quite right. And I just held on to that. I just didn't quite feel the peace that everything was going to be all right, like I did with Judah. Just no matter what, it was going to be all right.
And we didn't talk about that.
Yeah.
I mean, so she's feeling that on her side.
And
I'm having my own questions, but at the same time, I was feeling this lack of peace. I also had God telling me to read certain chapters and to read certain like miracles. So this whole time I'm thinking that God's gonna, like, it's gonna be bad, but then there's gonna be some crazy miracle that's gonna happen, which, as we know towards the end, that it did. But he also told me not to talk about it, and he made me think of that story in Joshua whenever they were getting ready to go take Jericho, and they were not allowed to talk for the time that they can pass the city. And so he just kind of kept me on that silent Jericho protocol.
So with that, if you know me at all, one of my greatest fears in life is just having children in general. I used to tease a lot as a young kid that I wasn't going to have kids just because I didn't want to go through labor. And then after having Judah, it wasn't the worst thing, it wasn't the best labor, but nonetheless I began to just have my normal fears of going through labor, but much more even so with what was coming. I didn't know how bad it was going to be, if the baby wasn't helping at all, if that was going to be worse, what kind of complications might come into play. I just began to have a lot of fears, and kind of like you said, we kind of were silently going through our own things.
Yeah, not like not from a purposely not communicating standpoint, but just because we felt like that God was saying not to cloud the atmosphere with that much, negativity or fear, those types of things.
Yeah, I think fear is probably the opposite of faith. And God told me just one day randomly to go back and read a prophecy that I had gotten years ago before we even had kids. And someone had texted me this prophecy after church one day, and God told me a lot of things, but in it he told me the deep desire for little ones to bring, to God, and that I shall be blessed and to have faith, and that I shall deliver. But there was a time for all things under the sun, a time to be born and a time to die. And it went on just talking about faith, but to be persuaded that, if I kept my eyes on God, then nothing could kind of touch me, kind of thing. And
it also said that she would understand the timing of all things.
Yes, it said looking back, I should see them more clearly, and great satisfaction and great rejoicing would be to me when I could stand to my feet praising God for his timing and deliverance. And during all this, we had moved to Indiana, but the COVID happened right towards the end of my pregnancy, which also played a huge role.
Oh yeah, I think so. Her prophecy directly leads into the prophecy that I got. So just as things were starting to get really real and getting close, COVID was shutting everything down. And the last meeting that we sat in church was one of those like spirit-filled popcorn type meetings where all these things are happening and the Lord is just all around it. And the way that God talks to me is I usually don't get prophecies about things that are like getting ready to happen or decisions I'm getting ready to make. He talks to me about those in dreams a lot of times, but I almost never get prophecies about an impending trial. I think God knows my particular personality type, and that thing just kind of cripples me. If I know something's coming, I just get kind of pretty crippled about it. But I'm sitting in church, and a little sister comes over to me and speaks in prophecy. The Lord uses her to tell me that God loves me greatly, and that the place that I was in was by his design, and that he saw that we had a heart to go where he said to go, and said because of that he's brought us to this place, but there was a trial coming. And it said, but fear not. It's very short and sweet. It said, but fear not. Told me and Taylor to pray together, and if we would pray together, he said God will take it. That's what it said, God will take it. And Taylor wasn't there at that time because she was sick at home. And so I got this prophecy by myself, and the cool part about it was that was the last time we were actually able to sit in meetings together, everybody as a whole. And later down the road, I realized why that prophecy had to come.
Yeah, and I had read that. I went and read that prophecy out of nowhere, just probably 2 or 3 days before you received that. And that prophecy also said the exact same thing. It said, "Fear not, for trials come to all men." I just went through that to not fear.
Which for us, kind of a full-time job. I mean, that the nature of our character, not fearing became the impetus of our life from that point forward. Just like whatever was going on, whatever's happening, we just tried to focus all of our attention on just the not fearing part.
So as it neared towards the end of my pregnancy, fear definitely got the best of me, probably. And I began to just worry. It set in. And the baby stopped moving out of nowhere. One day it was moving, the next day it wasn't. And after that, it's kind of all our initial thoughts were just kind of being confirmed, what God was trying to prepare us for.
We sat on the couch though after the baby stopped moving, and we had this probably one of the most cleansing conversations we've had for a while. We just kind of were super vulnerable and talked about some of our fears and inhibitions about what was coming. That was kind of the first time we were like breaking Jericho protocol and started to chat about these things.
Yeah. Yeah, when we had that conversation, I began to tell him just how far I felt like I had been slowly, I just let distance become between me and God, just my personal relationship. And I felt like I told him two things mainly, that I had just, somewhere down the line, I had just lost that childlike faith, that just like you pray and just God's there no matter what, like God's just there. And I felt like I just lost that love, that compassion. I feel like God specifically has made me to be a person to help people. God's given me the gift of helps, and you have to love people to try to help people. And I feel like I just lost compassion towards people, just love, just a simple loving my neighbor kind of thing. And through this, to get to the shortcut at the end, I feel like God, in leaps and bounds, has taught us how not to fear.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm fully persuaded that I can step out of any boat as long as I'm keeping my eyes on him, and he's got us because he's for us. Yeah. And my faith that his plan is for us, for me, leaps and bounds, and the love that poured out towards us, people poured out towards us, obviously only through Christ.
You're giving away too much at the end of the story.
I know.
She's giving away the end of the story. Listen, we don't believe in cliffhangers, but we know that y'all not going to stick around for another 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
So we're going to parcel this out. Give you some now, give you some in the future. She was trying to jump to the end, but I stopped it.
Anyway, I was not doing great. I told him that. We got down and prayed. And truthfully, it wasn't even after we spent all night kind of just on the couch crying and talking. And I got down and prayed, and really all I just prayed was God to help me to want to do better, because I just wasn't there. I was scared. Just a lot of things. And God did.
Yeah. And we'll tell you more about, of course, all the things that happen next. And it's not just one singular way that God has been working and these miracles have been happening. And they're also not over. Like, I feel like a lot of the ways that God has been working is still evolving, which is 90% of the reason why we said, okay, well, let's just bring all this in a video. Some of you guys keyed in when we did the live video. We talked a little bit about it, but it's just growing and evolving so much. So we said, we just got to keep talking about it, keep glorifying the Lord. And that's what we want to do. So we thank you guys for jumping in with us. And going through the process with us, and we look forward to telling you more. And hopefully, like Taylor said, it increases your faith and just makes you look at the Lord and say, yes, I like him and I want to be part of him.
Seek him. Yeah.
There my home shall